A series of polls from YouGov has put the Green Party in a really, really good position. Now, what you're seeing here are a series of hypothetical tactical matchups based on who is most likely to win. When asked, imagine now that in your constituency, the only two parties that appeared to have a chance of winning were X and Y. If that were the case, how would you vote? Now, for the Greens, the numbers are as follows. If it's Green versus Reform, it's 42% on the side of the Greens versus 27% for Reform. Huge. Greens versus Conservatives, the Greens on 37% and the Conservatives all the way behind on 29%. Greens versus Labour, the parties who are vying for the same voters, 30% of people would choose the Greens versus just 20% for Labour. The Greens are seemingly far more popular than Reform. Again, 42% to 27% is huge. Yet this is the national polling. Reform is still significantly ahead on 24%. The Greens are fourth place on 17%. Now, the Greens have gained 1% since YouGov last conducted their poll, whilst Reform have dropped 3 points. Now, YouGov continues to show momentum for the Greens, whilst Reform either stagnates or loses support. However, there's this new poll, which is once again very good news for the Green Party. Never mind the Greens polling first place with 18 to 49-year-olds, they now take the lead with 18 to 65-year-olds. And look at the huge age divide. You've got 65 and over, and there's a dramatic increase in support for Reform and the Tories, with the Greens just on 3%. Helena, what's going on here? I mean, you've got the Greens who are polling number one with those aged 18 to 65. They seemingly are far more popular than Reform in head-to-head matchups, but they're still significantly behind Reform in voting intentions. Is this Labour splitting the vote, or is there more to it?
I think it is Labour splitting the vote, but I think the reason why we're seeing this is that there hasn't been a national scale election or electoral test for the Green Party that can show people more broadly that they are a serious electoral force, right? There is essentially a large amount of this polling, as far as I can see, has come from the broader, more populist view that the Greens have taken that's won people over through the advocacy that's been done by the Green Party, not just on social media, but on mainstream media as well. You've had Green Party figures such as Caroline Lucas on Newsnight last night, or Zach's many appearances on Question Time to be able to increase the Green Party's national profile. And that has come off of a large outreach program that's been done on social media as well, both by the leadership and by the membership. But when it comes to voting intention polls, people are actually saying, who would I vote for in a Westminster election? And most people look at the Greens, go, I'd like to vote for them, but I don't want to split the vote. I'd like to vote for them, but the Labour Party are the assumed tactical vote because they are currently the incumbent. And until they are, it's in a big electoral test to show people that actually that the Labour Party are the ones splitting the vote, and it is the Greens are the ones who are best placed to be able to beat Reform. People won't know whether that is true or not. Luckily enough, we have not one but two electoral tests coming up to be able to show the Green Party's mettle in taking the fight to Reform and being the party that polls closest to them outside of the Labour Party, in the form of the Gorton and Denton by-election. Of course, you have your documentary coming up about in future for the Green Party. And there are the set of local elections, which are now all going ahead, thanks to the government's humiliating U-turn on this issue, coming up in May as well. We saw in May last year where Reform was seen as a protest party. They weren't seen as a natural party of opposition. They weren't seen as being serious compared to the Conservatives as the official opposition, until an electoral test where people felt free to vote for Reform showed them that that's not the case. And they won every single council that the Tories were defending. The Tories were defending about 14 councils, I believe. They lost all of them, almost all to Reform as well. And it was that point of inflection that showed that Reform were a real party and not a protest party, that saw their vote shoot up. You can look at the graph of where the polls go, the poll of polls, the aggregate, over time, and you'll see it's literally just after those mayor elections where Reform starts sweeping through to a much higher level than they were previously, because people looked at it and went, well, I'm now no longer voting as a protest. I'm voting for a party that can win and shown that it can win. So if the Green Party want to be an assumed potential vote for the next Westminster elections, it has to show the population that it can't just run, but it can also win those seats. And so that's why it's really important that the Greens treat these next set of local elections and this Gorton Denton by election, but especially the local elections, as the last set of important elections before 2029. There will not be a single set of locals with as many Labour defences as this one now. And if Greens start taking seats off of Labour, it will create that same effect that Reform showed before, too. Other thing that was interesting in this data also was the big generational gap.
Yeah.
And whilst I think we all understand why that is in terms of the kind of politics that these people represent, this isn't new. If you looked at the 2017 and 2019 elections, Corbyn would have had an outright majority if only under 65s had voted, probably would have had 400 seats. Keir Starmer or Tony Blair style if it was only working age people who voted in that election, but that it was the older generations that stopped Corbyn from being PM. That dynamic hasn't changed. But what I want to talk about is the individual way in which people look at class in relation to this. Like, there's a really great article by Anushka Kellyan in the New Statesman yesterday talking about how our definitions of working class have changed. And in the minds of the media, working class is about industrial versus service. There are working class industrialists and middle class service sector workers. But in 2026, most people work in the service sector. The modern working class is mostly people working in retail, working in call centers, working in menial minimum wage data entry jobs, all those kinds of things. And that's what a lot of young people make up, even though the older generations mostly made up manual workers before we deindustrialized. So people will look at these data going, older people voting for reform, younger people voting for the Greens, and go, well, this is working class versus middle class. Well, in reality, what it actually is a relationship to production that is actually material in terms of the workers who do the work. The working age people want to vote for the Green Party in this country, and people who rely on the state pension broadly are voting for reform and the Conservatives. Of course, this is a broader demographic idea. This isn't me saying that all boomers are right wing or all young people are left wing. Clearly, the polls show that
No.
that is not the case. But these are broader trends shown, which is why Reform is saying no more work from home, cutting the wages for the working age people, but they're not saying cut the triple lock. They're not saying that they would change the amount of welfare that the retired get, which is what Labour found when they tried to means test the winter fuel allowance. Reform knows where their voter base is, and it's mostly older people.
It's the Maurice Glassman like blue Labour definition of class. The industrial towns and manual work, and because he famously hates the term precariat. But I mean, it's all vibes based, and then the media love to do that. They think class is vibes based. It's like these sorts of people think that Jeremy Clarkson is either more working class or at least in touch with the working class because he drinks a pint and he goes on a farm than some blue head avocado on toast eating person, despite the fact that this person has just left university, shitload of debt, and has a 4-hour job at Topshop. So it is once again going back to Marxist class analysis, which is obviously not seen across the media. What I find interesting is that poll, the first poll, the Greens versus Reform. 42% say Green, 27% say Reform. The way I'm reading it, and I wonder if you read it the same, is that there is more voter migration between Labour and the Greens, insofar that Labour voters will happily get behind the Greens to stop Reform, whereas the Conservatives and Reform, where, okay, all the voters came from the Conservatives and went to Reform, it seems like these people are settled there and they're not willing to go back to the Conservatives, even if it will stop the left, because the Conservatives are not seeing a big poll boost to stop the left. Is that the way you're seeing it? And it feels like Reform voters are absolutely done with the Tories, despite the fact that half of them are in the Reform Party. Whereas Labour voters, of course, they're continually moving to the Greens anyway. But they will happily back the Greens to stop Reform.
Yeah, the 100%. Luke Trill from More in Common was analysing it in a very similar way, and I think I agree with you both here. The migrations we're seeing in terms of party affiliation haven't been between voter blocks, it's been within voter blocks.
Yeah.
There's a broad,
Yeah.
like, anti-Tory, anti-reform voting block and a broadly anti-Labour voting block. People move within those, although it does appear to be the case that you're more likely to see tactical voting from those in the left-coded block than you are seeing from the right-wing one. Because again, the Tories have the stench of failure. People have migrated from Tory to Reform because they recognise the Conservative Party as being the ones who caused the budget crash in 2022 that nuked people's mortgages and people's pensions, and they're the party that let in 1 million people in terms of migration in 2022, and they find those sins unforgivable. Whereas I think that the spectrum of people who find the sins of the Labour Party unforgivable is quite small. I mean, I agree there are a lot of people who find Labour's position on Gaza, for example, unconscionable, and for people like you and myself, that means we're never voting Labour. But most people see Labour's failures in terms of disability cuts and policies that directly affect them. And those aren't as big as sins in terms of how people would migrate between voter groups that they would never vote Labour even tactically than the ones that the Conservative Party have inflicted upon their own voter base. I'll finish by responding to the Morris Glassman thing as well, whilst we're here, which was that one thing that his analysis misses out is access to capital. In fact, the big thing that's different between younger and older generations is home ownership. It's the reason why the Tories lost so many voters, as I said before, was because mortgages went up. No motherfucker under the age of 50 has got a mortgage, at least the broadest prospectus is their rate of home ownership is insignificantly lower than the over 50s, and so they weren't as particularly concerned about the Liz Truss stuff, and also mostly left wing anyway. And that's the real issue here, is that millennials are not getting more right wing as they age because they're not passing the point with which their views become solidified in their middle ages at a time when they have home ownership. They don't have capital to protect. They don't need to conserve anything. Why would they become conservative? It makes no sense. And that's why we're seeing the cohort of younger, more liberal voters or more left-leaning voters continually age higher and higher as these polls come out, and as the older generations, but they unfortunately leave the electorate, shall we say.
Leave. That's very polite way of putting it. Yeah, people don't get conservative as they get older. It's like not a natural phenomenon. It is just when an economy works, you work hard, you get a house, and you feel like you have a stake in society, you're going to become more conservative because you become more comfortable, don't you? That is how generations have been for the last 60, 70 years, right? Because the post-war consensus worked for people. Of course, we're the first generation where it hasn't worked. We're just responding to our material conditions, not because we're thicky, dumb, stupid leftists.